everyone. It's Joyce Wheeler here with Fairfax Surrogacy. I'm so excited to be here today for this webinar. Today with me is Lisa Schuman and Dr. Mark Leonderis. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you for having us. So I am the founding director of a group called the Center for Family Building, and we provide counseling and also consulting services for people who are pursuing their family building journey through donor eggs, donor sperm, and surrogacy. And I'm also the host of a podcast called Donor Conception Conversations, which is available on YouTube and all of the audio platforms that you could listen to. And Dr. Leonderis and I are the co-authors of this book, which is we're very proud of, and which is available for pre-purchase on Amazon or any local retailer.
Joyce, I'm so thrilled to be here for this webinar. You know, in the past 20 years of my career, you know, I went from the Army to being the medical director of the ART laboratory in Washington, D.C., and then I landed here in Connecticut, and I've been here for 20 plus years. So I'm the medical director and founder of Illume Fertility, and my family journey, it led to the foundation of Gay Parents to Be. So I'm also the founder of that, and you know, we strive at Illume Fertility to be a wholly inclusive practice, and we've worked hard over the years and have been a healthcare equality leader over through HRC since 2017, one of the few IVF practices. But the opportunity to chat today about donor conception and who we are and how we come to this is so welcome. So thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you both so much for being here today. I'm excited to dive into some questions. Today, we are talking about the challenges faced by the LGBTQIA community when it comes to surrogacy and donor conception. So we'll just dive right in. The first question we have for you both is, do you mind sharing a little bit about your personal journeys? What inspired you more to focus on this field specifically? Dr. L, I'll start with you.
Sure. So Leonderis and LGBTQIA are both hard to say, so yes. We'll move forward from there. So, you know, for me, you know, moving forward of wanting to be a father and also coming out and so on was a process. And back in 2007, 2008, 2009, there were a lot less resources for our community. And what we found, my husband and I found, is that there were just so many more questions than there were answers. Everything from where to find a donor. At that point in time, there were very few known donors out there, how to talk to your children, and so on. So it led to this kind of passion project of, you know, really learning more and disseminating that knowledge. So you know, my place in this community for donor conception comes out of my personal experience of growing my family and having my kids and working with 2 different surrogates and 2 different agencies, and also from kind of my lifelong desire to learn and teach and train. So all those things kind of dovetail together over my 20 plus year history of taking care of infertility patients from the entire kind of rainbow of our humanity to, you know, at this point in time, like 70 to 80% of my patients are, you know, identify as queer as part of the larger community. So, you know, for me, you know, I usually say, like, I work for baby pictures. Like, this is kind of like what makes my motor run to help everybody achieve their family building goals, or if they can't, make sure they feel like they had every option to investigate everything they needed and made the decision for a child-free living. I mean, this is you know, a career of helping others.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I often say that this may be a selfish position for myself in case management, working with intended parents and surrogates, because honestly, I live for the baby photos. I live for the updates. I've walked the path as a surrogate before, so it really is beautiful and wonderful, and it never ever gets old. So thank you. Lisa, what about you? What was your driving force behind joining this?
So Dr. Leonderis and I have very similar views with regard to this. We really feel very passionate about trying to help people have a better journey to parenthood. And I also had a different but very complicated journey to parenthood myself. I had lots of fertility treatment 25 years ago when fertility treatment was very different. And through that process, which became very, very complicated, I had had many surgeries, and my husband did as well. And I've pursued surrogacy and almost every possible process you can imagine, and ended up adopting my 3 children at the end. And so through that process, I really felt that this is my calling. I really could help people. And at that time, I started working in this industry and really loved it. And since then, it's been, 20 plus years that I've been doing this, and I really enjoy helping people have a better path to parenthood. And, at this point in our careers, it was really important for us to write this book because we could really distill all this information that patients don't know about. We see patients day after day, and they ask the same questions, they have the same struggles. And we thought if we put this in a book, we can really reach a wider audience and help patients or patients to be have an easier path to parenthood so they don't have to struggle as much.
So, what have been some of the challenges, though, for the LGBTQIA community when it comes to surrogacy or donor conceptions? We're noticing these positive changes, but have you noticed anything, or have you experienced any of the challenges that this community faces?
I'll get started here, and Lisa can fill in from her perspective. So, the first thing is that as a member of the LGBTQI community, in general, you're going to need a donor. And I think that there's a certain amount of sadness about that, and an unrealized expectation of how hard it is to find a donor, to not exactly replace yourself, but this is going to be forever somebody's genetics and family tree that's part of your family. And I can tell you that I've heard other providers say, oh, well, they just need a donor. And that's such a, it's a disconcerting comment. In general, we would love to be able to conceive with each other, but we can't, right? But we also see ourselves as parents. And so surmounting those hurdles of all the education, extra costs, time, as well as finding a sperm or egg donor to be able to build our family, that's a lot. And I often say that our community, makes hundreds of decisions that nobody has ever faced in the history of humanity to bring their family to life. So, it is a big hurdle. Also, after marriage equality got past the Supreme Court, I think there's more a feeling of safety and community, but we still have our own anxieties about, who to tell and what we can tell and so on. So, it's still, if you think about where we are in the United States compared to the rest of the world, this is still a very new reality that our community can be parents and our families can be safe. Lisa, you've spoken to many people in a lot deeper tone than a doctor speaks to them. What do you hear about anxieties or stress for members of the community as they move forward with family building?
Well, I think it's so difficult to both find a doctor who you feel is going to embrace you, and also to make sure that you're going to be at a clinic that does good medicine, right? It's really difficult. And very often we see people who come in and say, well, I really wanted to find a doctor who's going to be there for me, or a therapist who's going to be there for me and be part of my community, or be part or be an ally. And that's great, but it's also important to feel empowered to make sure that that doctor also cares for the patient and can help you get pregnant, right? And so I think those practical things get lost in, what Dr. Leonderis is sharing, some of the anxieties in pursuing this. And although that's changing, I think there are still some anxieties. For example, I think when a same-sex couple comes into treatment, they go through treatment, and very often they'll say, how do you do this? How do you do that? Straight couples also get an education on their 10th grade biology all over again. They have to learn everything. And this is why Dr. Leonderis wrote a couple of chapters about this in this book, because everyone needs to relearn how this works. And patients very often will say to me, well, I need a baby class because I don't know how to take care of a baby. And I say to them, well, no woman knows how to take care of a baby either when she gives birth the first time. So, I think everybody has to understand that this is new for everyone. And that is also an anxiety that people bring to this. They have to get a good doctor who embraces them, but also who has good statistics and can get them pregnant and also can help them usher them into parenthood.
And I think that historically, the extra finances that face LGBT couples has been really significant. I think, for a same-sex male couple, often you're talking about $200,000 just to have one child. For a same-sex female couple, to use that terminology, you're talking about purchasing sperm, finding a clinic that can work with you, and so on. And oftentimes it's upwards of $20,000 to $30,000 to have a child. So, I'm really happy to say that I live in a state where our fertility mandate has become inclusive. I'm thrilled that Illinois is, and I'm really, buoyed by the fact that, not only Resolve, the National Infertility Support Network, but my own professional society, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, just recently in October released their new definition of infertility, which is inclusive. Joyce, is it okay if I read that?
Absolutely, please do.
So what the way they redefine infertility is that it's a disease, condition, or status characterized by any of the following: the inability to achieve a successful pregnancy based on a person's medical, sexual, and reproductive history, age, physical findings, diagnostic testing, or any combination of those factors. Number two, the need for medical intervention, including but not limited to the use of donor gametes or donor embryos in order to achieve a successful pregnancy, either as an individual or with a partner, right? And in patients having regular unprotected intercourse and without any known etiology for either partner suggesting of impaired reproductive ability, evaluation should be initiated at 12 months when the female partner is under 35 years of age, and 6 months when the female partner is 35 years of age or older. Nothing in this definition shall be used to deny or delay treatment to any individual, regardless of relationship status or sexual orientation. You may not be aware that the insurance companies have actively denied treatment based on the definition of infertility. And now they don't have that kind of shield to stand behind. So my hope is, even in states that don't have a fertility mandate, if they have corporate insurance, then the insurance has to follow the definition of infertility, which allows the use of donor gametes, which you're not going to be discriminated against if you happen to have a same-sex partner or if you're a single parent to be. If you want to be a parent, you should have access to your benefit, and you pay into the same plan as everybody else who's using their fertility benefits, so you should have access to that. So I'm really hopeful in the next 2 or 3 years. It'll take a long time for insurance companies to get around to policy changes, but that will hopefully take the upper cost down for members of the community to have children. And it's very clear, and Lisa can speak to this as well, that what's in the literature is children of LGBTQI families are doing very well. And it may be they're doing very well because they tend to be older, because they didn't have an accidental pregnancy. They had to do a lot of homework. It's in a really intentional parenting pathway. It would be naive for me to say, because parenting is so much work, that I'm a better parent than anybody else. But it is not naive to say that to be an LGBTQI parent requires intention, resource, and support. And that being said, by the time your baby comes to your home, you're ready. So, if we weave this all in, it is more work for our community to have children. But I feel like, at least in the United States, the tide is starting to change towards getting us that support.
Yeah, and hopefully that will change things. Dr. Leonderis and I don't know if you saw, wrote a couple of papers on this subject, and one of them was presented at ASRM in 2019, because we saw that a lot of our same-sex male couples who came into the clinic had a lot of difficulty because they really wanted to have a child with each of their genetics. And because they were not able, according to ASRM guidelines and really, the best health for the person carrying and the children, not able to have a twin pregnancy any longer, because this is not what people do, they're really stuck in a situation where they either pursue two different surrogate journeys, which is incredibly expensive, or have to choose whose genetics they're going to use. And that's a really tough situation to be in. And so we really wanted to sensitize everyone in our community, the whole medical community, that when patients come to you, it's important to just not dismiss them, but really understand that they're struggling with this really tough decision.
Definitely. The limitations are there. It's obvious. The limitations to families building through third-party reproduction have always been there, and now we're hopeful that tides are changing. Like Dr. L said, we're seeing it. We're absolutely seeing the changes, and it takes a village. That's a whole new different meaning when you talk about third-party reproduction. But the reality is that we need to lean on each other. We need to be advocates and allies and help our friends and family build their family, whatever that looks like. So as we see tides changing, as we see things happening, what would be your advice to individuals in the LGBTQIA community, or even couples that are just now starting this path or just now thinking, hey, we want to build our family? What advice would you give to them?
I mean, I think you already touched on it. It takes a village. And, Lisa, as a mental health professional, can talk a little bit more about this. But, if you need a donor, then you need to make sure you're choosing your donor for the right reason. And, a big part of the book is kind of trying to give people a process to choosing a donor. And understanding it would be natural for us to want to find a donor that looks like us. Or maybe if you're a couple and you're both planning on conceiving, whether it's a two-mom couple or a two-dad couple, a donor that might be part Mexican and part Chinese or so on, if you're trying to do an ethnic match. But the reality is how somebody looks is not probably the best way to choose a donor. So in the book, we talk about, a 5-step process where the last step is the thing where people mostly start. Like, how does this person look? What do they do for sports? What do they do for art? And so on and so on. And leading with the things you can control. And so I think that advice out there also includes understand that not only do you need a donor, but you need a mental health professional to screen everybody. You need a lawyer to do your legal agreements, especially for the LGBTQI community, but even any heterosexual couples out there, especially when you use surrogacy or use donor gametes, you need to make sure your parental rights are always protected, right? So you've got mental health professionals, you've got lawyers, you've got professional agencies like Fairfax Surrogacy kind of covering your back if you're doing a surrogacy journey. And you've got your medical people, which doctors and nurses and laboratory professionals maintaining the integrity of the chain of custody. So it is your village involved basically many different professional communities that are all there with the same goal. That's the beauty of it. Everybody wants you to be successful. So we all have the same page. And I think it's really hard when one particular aspect says, listen, maybe you shouldn't work with this person, whether it be a surrogate or a donor. That can be heartbreaking. But that comes from years of experience and an insight that person who wants to work with that donor or that surrogate doesn't have. So the last thing we really want is anything to go bad on the pathway to parenthood or after your child's born.
I know Fairfax does a very good job of making sure that the people that you work with are screened. But for those of you who are out there who don't know, it's very, very important for either your gestational carrier or your donor to go through the screening. And of course, you're looking for different things because this carrier needs to be able to manage the relationship and also the process, whereas the donor, you're really concerned more about her genetics, what she's going to pass on to your child, right? In either case, we are looking for mental health history. We're looking for all of that through an interview and also a psychological test called the PAI or the MMPI. That test will screen for psychopathology, but there's also 2 indicators for deception. There's overt and covert lying scale. And that's really important because if your donor or your carrier is lying about things in the test, she might be lying about her medical information, and we don't want that. So it's very important to have someone who's skilled and who's experienced and who you can really trust. Very often when you go to some places that employ mental health professionals, you may not get an objective person doing the screening. It's very important to get an objective person doing the screening, and that way there will be no incentive for them just to rubber stamp everyone. It'll be really important for you to make sure that your person is an independent practitioner who is going to look at this donor or gestational carrier in an objective way. And as Dr. Leonderis said, we don't want anything to go wrong. It's very disheartening when your gestational carrier or your donor does not pass, but ultimately this is your child's life, and this is not a problem that you can unwind. Once you sign that piece of paper and say, yes, I'm going to go forward with this donor or this GC, there's nothing that you can do after that. This is really, a problem that can't be undone. So you want to make sure that you're choosing somebody who's really going to give you the best and healthiest outcome possible, even if it takes a little more work.
And imagine right now you want to have a baby, but I need us all to remember that these babies are going to be children and going to be adults. So when you look for your donor, you also have to think about fast forwarding the clock, what your child's going to face when they're 15 to 25. I think we always need to think about our children. So as somebody who has 2 donor conceived children, my lens has been affected through their perspective. And I think that we want to really be honest with ourselves as we choose a donor, that this is a multi-year commitment of the donor and the child. And in fact, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine has also put the burden on that commitment on the clinics as well. This is not just conception, but it's a future person that we want to be mentally and stable and secure as they move to adulthood. I mean, Lisa, there's many examples. I know you've talked about them, about what happens when people don't share donor conception early and often. Especially, I think it's a burden for people who are suffering with their own fertility and use a donor and don't want to share that with their child. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so all the research really shows that sharing this information early and often with your children is really important. And people, in the LGBTQIA plus community sometimes don't think, they say, well, I don't really need to talk about this because my kid's just going to figure it out. It's obvious that I need an egg donor, sperm donor. But what's important is to think about 2 things. Number one, if your child hears it from day one, it becomes a backdrop of their life, right? This is just who they know they are. You never have to sit them down and say, I have to tell you how you came into the world. And then all of a sudden they have to reconfigure how they know themselves. And that can be very shocking to their identity. And number 2, it's really important for the parents to try to find a story, to find a narrative that really speaks to them. And that can be hard to do. It can be hard to talk to your child about this kind of adult information. And so if parents give themselves the opportunity through this process, or even when they're babies in utero, to start to talk to each other about what their narrative looks like and to practice it over and over again, it won't sound awkward to the child when it comes out. And people say, well, why should I bother speaking to a baby about this information? Because it gives you a chance to practice. You can get the kinks out, you can adjust your story, you can modify your story. And by the time the child knows what you're saying, you've said it 1,000 times, it just rolls off your tongue very easily. And research shows us time and time again that children who either learn accidentally or late in life have the biggest problems with donor conception. So we're hearing it over and over again, and it's really important for people to understand.
Most recently at the national meeting we just had, to just a group of doctors, there was a video shared about a young woman who found out that who she thought she was, 100% Italian, was not who she is. And it's a tearful video discussing that, I just wish I had known all along. And I will tell you for myself, this book process was like a 3 to 4 year process. I learned more about talking to my child, and I was always advised. So I practice when our kids were in our arms. But I do think it might be hard for some people to get those words out. But if you practice when they're in their arms, that, either mommy and daddy or daddy and papa or mama and mommy could not have a baby without the help of some special cells. And we needed those to help us. And we needed somebody else to carry you in their tummy to bring you to our family. That's an early story. And when you get good at that, eventually you're going to get a question, but they already know their base. Most importantly, we want every child to know that they were loved, wanted, and cared for. And we don't want them to find something out by accident or by somebody else that their most trusted humans, their parents, didn't tell them. So this kind of pathway to discovery and this talking about donor conception from the point of medical, social, and through the eyes of their children led to this kind of, development of this book. And the medicine part is relatively straightforward. And I mean, huge kudos to Lisa to basically saying this book needs to be read, because I talked to so many people who maybe didn't prepare their children well enough, or the children that still have a lot of questions. So this whole process is about helping the parents to be, but really also about helping the child to be.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful you guys brought this point up. Honestly, as a case manager, as a mother, as a former surrogate, when I did my first surrogacy journey, I carried for family. So we had a relationship with them. We spent holidays together. We knew them. So very early on in our journey, we had to decide what's the narrative. What are we going to tell these kids? We were thinking of them. And then what we came up with was, we have our story, but more importantly, they have theirs. And their story doesn't have the emotional attachment that our story did. So for them, it's their backdrop, as you said, but for us, it was so much more. So I think one thing to consider as a donor or a surrogate is that their story supersedes your story to an extent. You are creating someone's future that's going to last for generations. So we had to kind of detach what our emotions were to the situation and just allow them to have their story. And that was, 7.5 years ago. And they know that I carried them in their tummy, but they know who mom and dad is. And for them, that's the only life they've ever known. So questions will come as they get older and they notice that maybe their friends didn't have a surrogate to help them bring them into this world, but for them, I think it's going to just be their story. And so I'm so grateful you guys brought that up in this segment, because we are creating stories for these children, and we want to be sure that it's amazing. So
Joyce,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's a really good point particularly for straight couples, because you come into this process typically with a lot of loss and a lot of pain. And it is important to kind of separate that from your child's story, because your child's story has to be one of feeling grateful and feeling appreciative for your gestational carrier and feeling happy about everything that you did to bring your child into the world. But in your own personal life, there's going to be probably a lot of pain and some loss. And that is important to be able to separate those things. So I'm glad you raised that issue.
Yeah, I had that village, as we talked about. We were able to create a pretty strong village, and now these beautiful babies are 7 and they know their story. So thank you both again for being here and sharing. I do want to let everyone know that we are going to have a giveaway for this book that you guys have built, Building Your Family. It's going to be through Instagram, so feel free to check that out and enter to win. Thanks to everyone that came today to watch the webinar. We hope to connect again super soon. And of course, if you have questions, if you're looking to build your family, if you're interested in surrogacy or as an intended parent or even an egg donor, you can always reach out to our websites, to Fairfax Surrogacy. And of course, if you guys want to share where they can connect with you, that would be super helpful too.
Sure.
So familybuilding.net is where you can find all the information. I also have a page on that website where you can look and get the book. If you don't win the book in the sweepstakes, you can get the book, and if you put in the code for where you chose the book, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble, then you can also get a free video as well.
So Lisa, you have a copy of the book right there. It's so that's kind of really what you'll see to purchase. It's available, I think, for pre-order now. It'll be out the middle of November. And you know, to reach me, you can reach me through Illume Fertility. You can reach me through Gay Parents to Be. You can also you know, reach me through your website and so on.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.